Tonight, we're opening a book with its most important chapters missing. Whole pages of our story, torn out and nearly forgotten. What if we are not the first? What if civilizations older than anything we recognize once thrived, only to be wiped away in cataclysms so devastating their memory survived only as myth? That's the trail we're following tonight. A city of concentric rings said to sink in a single day. Subterranean cities carved deep into volcanic stone, as if their builders knew disaster would come from above. Monoliths so massive, even the strongest cranes today would shatter under their weight. Each fragment, each ruin, forces us to confront a chilling possibility. History may not be what we think it is. Tonight, we chase the echoes of civilizations erased from memory and ask whether humanity has lived this story before. If you find a sense of calm or a spark of curiosity in these late-night wanderings, a gentle click on the like and subscribe buttons is a quiet way of letting me know we're on the right path together. As always, with these histories, the visuals are only here to add a little color to the background. The real journey is the one we take in our minds. In the comments below, feel free to share where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always nice to see the quiet global community we've built. Now find that comfortable spot, let your shoulders relax, and allow the world outside your window to fade away. Let's begin our search for what was lost. You've always been fascinated by things that vanish. It starts small. A misplaced set of keys, a childhood toy that disappears from the attic, a photograph that you're sure was in the shoebox, but is now just a memory. There's a strange ache to it, a sense of an incomplete story. Now imagine that feeling magnified 1,000,000 times over. Imagine losing not a toy, but an entire city, a culture, a civilization. This is the enduring pull of the lost world, the ultimate cold case. It speaks to a deep-seated part of us that wonders about permanence. We build our lives, our cities, our legacies, stacking them one stone at a time, quietly hoping they will outlast us. But history is a relentless tide, and it has a habit of washing things away, leaving behind only whispers and riddles. Some lost cities aren't really lost at all. They were just waiting. You can walk through the streets of Pompeii, a city flash-frozen in time by volcanic ash, and see the ghostly imprints of lives interrupted mid-sentence. You can climb the stone terraces of Machu Picchu in Peru, a breathtaking citadel abandoned by the Inca and hidden from the Spanish conquistadors for centuries, veiled by clouds and jungle. These places are tangible. You can touch the cold stone, feel the mountain air, and know that people lived and breathed right where you stand. The mainstream historical consensus is that these are the true lost cities, not magically vanished, but reclaimed by nature or emptied by conquest and disease. Heinrich Schliemann, a German businessman obsessed with Homer's epic poems, was convinced the legendary city of Troy was real. The academics of his day scoffed, treating the Trojan War as pure myth. But Schliemann, armed with little more than a copy of the Iliad and a stubborn refusal to take no for an answer, dug into a hill in modern-day Turkey and found it. He unearthed not one city, but layers of them, a chronicle of destruction and rebuilding stretching back thousands of years. Troy proves that sometimes, just sometimes, a myth has a memory. But we're going deeper than that tonight. We're looking for the ghosts, the ones that exist on the very edge of history and legend. These are the stories that don't have a clear X on the map. They are the tantalizing whispers from antiquity that suggest a much older and more mysterious human story. It's a rabbit hole lined with strange artifacts, geological anomalies, and enduring myths that span the entire globe. The allure is intoxicating, this idea of a great forerunner civilization, an ancestor culture that was wiped from the slate, leaving only faint scattered clues for us to piece together. Think of the obsessive quest of British explorer Percy Fawcett, who vanished in the 1920s while searching for his fabled City of Z deep within the Amazon. He was convinced he'd found evidence of a sophisticated stone-building civilization in a place everyone else believed could only support small, scattered tribes. He was ridiculed, but as we'll see later, maybe his intuition wasn't entirely wrong. The debate among scholars over just how much of our collective human story has been erased is a constant quiet hum in the background of archaeology. How many coastal settlements, ports, and even entire cities from the end of the last ice age now lie dormant under hundreds of feet of water? When the great ice sheets melted, the sea levels rose dramatically. It wasn't a gentle lapping at the shore. It was an inexorable advance that would have drowned coastlines around the world. Any civilization that flourished near the water back then would have its foundations on the modern continental shelf, a place we've only just begun to explore. This isn't a fringe idea. It's a geological certainty. The question is what, or who, was there to be washed away? This single geological event frames our entire search, creating the perfect conditions for a civilization to vanish almost without a trace. It's the perfect crime with the ocean as the primary suspect and 12,000 years of silence as its alibi. And at the heart of this mystery, there is one name that has echoed through the centuries more than any other. A name that has become shorthand for the ultimate lost paradise, the ultimate cautionary tale: Atlantis. This one name, Atlantis, wasn't unearthed by a dogged archaeologist digging in the Turkish soil. It wasn't found inscribed on a clay tablet in the sands of Mesopotamia. It comes to us from one of the most brilliant minds of the ancient world, the philosopher Plato. And that right there is the beginning of the problem. Plato wasn't a historian. He was a teacher of ideas. He dealt in concepts of justice, truth, and the ideal state. He tells the story of Atlantis in two of his famous dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias. And he doesn't even claim to be the original source. The story, he says, was passed down to him through his family, originating with the great Athenian statesman Solon, who a couple of centuries earlier had traveled to Egypt. It was there, in the ancient temple city of Sais, that a group of priests supposedly shared this incredible piece of lost history with him, pulling it from their sacred records. So let's follow that thread back. Let's imagine you are standing on the deck of a ship, the warm Mediterranean sun on your face. You have just passed through the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, and entered the vast unknown Atlantic. You sail on, and soon on the horizon a landmass appears. This is the island of Atlantis. It is immense, larger than Libya and Asia, meaning North Africa, and Anatolia put together. As you draw closer, you see a vast fertile plain stretching inland, surrounded by a ring of beautiful mountains that shield it from the harsh northern winds. The air is sweet with the scent of strange flowers, and you see herds of animals you've only ever heard of in stories, including Plato tells us elephants. The island is a self-contained paradise, rich with every kind of food timber and precious metal imaginable. But your destination is the capital, the royal metropolis, and it is unlike any city you have ever conceived. It is a masterpiece of divine geometry. At its heart lies a central island, and around it, in perfect symmetry, are 3 concentric rings of water and 2 of land, like a bullseye carved into the earth. The city is a perfect circle. You sail your ship into the first great outer harbor, a bustling port filled with merchants from every corner of the known world. From there, a massive canal 50 stades long that's over 5 miles has been cut straight through the rings of land wide enough for the largest ships of the day to pass through. You sail down this canal under elegant stone bridges connecting the land rings, and the sheer scale of the engineering is staggering. Your own city probably struggles to fill its potholes, but these people built a perfectly circular navigable metropolis, seemingly out of raw ambition. The walls are what truly take your breath away. The outermost wall ringing the entire city is coated in bronze, and it catches the sunlight with a dull martial gleam. The wall of the next ring of land is coated in tin, shining like pale silver. But the innermost wall, the one that circles the central acropolis, is coated in a metal you've never seen before. Plato calls it orichalcum. He says it was mined from the earth of the island and was considered second only to gold in value. And as you gaze upon it, you understand why. It has a fiery, reddish, almost living glow, as if the wall itself were smoldering with captured sunlight. Finally, you arrive at the central island, the sanctum of power. Here stand the royal palace and the holy temples. The grandest of all is the temple dedicated to the city's patron god Poseidon. It is a wonder of the ancient world. The entire exterior is coated in silver, except for the pinnacles on the roof, which are pure gold. You step inside, and the vast space silences you. The roof is carved from ivory, intricately decorated with gold, silver, and that strange, glowing orichalcum. But your eyes are drawn to the center of the temple. There stands a colossal golden statue of Poseidon himself, standing in a chariot drawn by 6 winged horses so tall that his head touches the ceiling. He is surrounded by 100 nereids riding on dolphins. It's a display of wealth and power so absolute it borders on the divine. This was a civilization that had mastered engineering, architecture, and resource management on a scale that beggars belief. They had hot and cold running water, elaborate baths, gymnasiums, and racetracks. No one ever seemed to worry about the grocery run. The land provided everything in abundance. The city was ruled by 10 kings, all descended from Poseidon, and a mortal woman named Klatoa family tree that would make for a very complicated holiday dinner. For generations, they ruled with wisdom and virtue, their divine blood keeping them from the temptations of greed and arrogance. Their laws were just, and their people were prosperous. And this is where historians and philosophers begin to part ways. Scholars still argue whether Plato was recounting a genuine piece of lost history, a memory preserved in Egyptian temples, or if he was crafting the ultimate political allegory. Was Atlantis a real place of forerunner civilization that existed 11,600 years ago? Or was it a fictional utopia, a thought experiment designed to teach his students in Athens about what happens when a perfect society blessed with every advantage loses its way? For a long, long time, Atlantis was the perfect state. But as you stand there, in the shadow of that golden god, you can almost feel a subtle shift in the air. Perfection is a fragile thing. And in Plato's telling, the divine part of the Atlanteans' nature began to fade, and their mortal, grasping human side began to take over. You can feel the change in the city's atmosphere almost immediately. The initial awe you felt standing in that magnificent temple to Poseidon begins to curdle into something else. Unease. The perfect harmony of the concentric rings now seems rigid, oppressive. The gleam of orichalcum on the inner wall feels less like a divine glow and more like a feverish blush of pride. The Atlanteans, Plato tells us, began to be filled with unrighteous avarice and power. Their divine nature, diluted over generations of mixing with mortals, was weakening, The virtues that had made them great wisdom, temperance, justice, were being replaced by baser instincts. You see it in the eyes of the merchants in the harbor, no longer content with fair trade, now haggling with a sharper, more predatory edge. You see it in the swagger of the soldiers guarding the bridges, their posture no longer one of noble service, but of arrogant authority. The once just laws inscribed on a pillar of orichalcum in Poseidon's temple are still there, but they are now selectively enforced. A little-known fact is that Plato describes these laws in detail, including one that forbade the kings from taking up arms against one another, requiring them to come to each other's aid if any one of them was attacked. It was a perfectly designed confederation for mutual defense. But that defensive pact was no longer enough. The kings of Atlantis, consumed by hubris, looked outward from their perfect island. They saw a world that was not as orderly, not as wealthy, not as powerful as theirs. And they decided it should be. They assembled a mighty army and a vast navy, their goal nothing short of world domination. They systematically conquered the other islands of the Atlantic and swept through the Pillars of Hercules, enslaving the peoples of North Africa as far as Egypt and of Europe as far as Tyrrhenia, which is modern-day Tuscany in Italy. Their ambition was boundless. Their military machine seemed unstoppable. It was the first great imperial project in human history, an empire of the sea that predated anything Rome or Britain could ever dream of. And for a time, it seemed that the entire Mediterranean, the whole known world, would fall under the shadow of the golden trident of Atlantis. Only one city-state stood in their way, a plucky virtuous, and in this telling prehistoric Athens. Plato paints his own city as the moral opposite of Atlantis. Where Atlantis was consumed by wealth and power, Athens was guided by wisdom and courage. They were the David to the Atlantean Goliath. When all the other Greek states lost their nerve and surrendered, Athens stood alone, leading a desperate alliance against the overwhelming might of the invaders. In a great battle, the Athenians miraculously defeated the Atlantean forces, driving them back and liberating all the lands they had conquered. It was a victory for the underdog, a triumph of spirit over material strength. It's easy to see why this story would have resonated with an Athenian audience. It's the ultimate pep talk. Remember, folks, we've always been the good guys, even 9,000 years ago. It is precisely at this point that the philosopher in Plato truly shows his hand. The entire story serves as a powerful moral lesson. Atlantis wasn't just an empire. It was a fallen paradise. It had been given every gift from the gods, bountiful resources, incredible knowledge, and a peaceful society, and it had squandered it all on a lust for power. It's a timeless cautionary tale against imperial overreach and moral decay, a warning that no matter how advanced or powerful a society becomes, it is ultimately doomed if it loses its soul. Historians who view the story as pure allegory point to this clear moral structure as Exhibit A. It's a philosophical fable, not a historical account. One quirky tidbit often overlooked is that Plato's description of the Atlantean military includes war chariots, which is a bit of an anachronism. Chariots were a Bronze Age technology common around 1500 BC, not 9600 BC. This detail suggests to many scholars that Plato was using elements from his own world to flesh out his ancient tale. But then, just as you're settling comfortably into the idea that this is all just a story, Plato throws in details that are unnervingly specific. He doesn't just say Atlantis existed a long time ago. He gives a date. He says the war and the subsequent cataclysm happened 9,000 years before Solon's time. Solon lived around 600 BC. Do the math, and you land at a date of roughly 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago from our present. An oddly precise number for a simple fable. He also gives the precise dimensions of the canals, the rings, and the temple. He names the 10 kings, the sons of Poseidon. Why include such a wealth of seemingly trivial detail if the story is just a metaphor? This is the central debate that keeps Atlantis alive. Was Plato simply a masterful storyteller, adding verisimilitude to his fiction? Or was he passing on the fragmented memory of a real event, wrapped in the language of myth and philosophy? The gods, or perhaps the cosmos itself, delivered the final judgment. As you stand on the shores of prehistoric Athens, celebrating the victory over the invaders, a tremor runs through the earth. Far out in the Atlantic, the very foundations of the world begin to shake. Zeus, the king of the gods, looked down upon the once noble race of Atlantis, saw their corruption, and decided to make an example of them. Plato's text becomes chillingly blunt. There occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis in like manner was swallowed up by the sea and disappeared. In one terrifying 24-hour cycle, the entire continent with its gleaming temples, its concentric canals, and its arrogant kings was dragged beneath the waves. Gone, erased from the map as if it had never been. The cataclysm was so absolute that it left behind nothing but an impassable muddy shoal, a hazard to any ship that tried to find it. The greatest empire the world had ever known had vanished, leaving behind only a story, a warning whispered by Egyptian priests to a curious Greek traveler, a brutal total reset. You're left standing on that imaginary shoreline, the victory against Atlantis suddenly feeling hollow. The world itself seems unstable, capable of wiping the slate clean with terrifying speed. Plato's timeline, that very specific 9600 BC, hangs in the air. For centuries, this date was largely dismissed as fantastical. Mainstream history taught us that in 9600 BC, humanity was firmly in the Stone Age. You're standing on the edge of a vast sheet of ice 2 miles thick, in places that covers most of North America, Europe, and Asia. This is the height of the last ice age. The world is a colder, drier place. So much of the planet's water is locked up in these colossal glaciers that global sea levels are about 400 feet lower than they are today. Coastlines are completely different. Britain is not an island. It's a frozen peninsula of northern Europe. You could have walked from Siberia to Alaska across the Bering Land Bridge. Florida is twice the size it is now. The world map is a completely different puzzle. Then around 12,800 years ago, something happened. Something sudden and catastrophic. The planet, which had been gradually warming, was plunged back into a brutal cold snap that lasted for over 1,000 years. This period is known as the Younger Dryas. Imagine the climate of Scotland suddenly descending upon Southern California, and you get the picture. The cause of the Younger Dryas is one of the most hotly contested debates in climate science. One leading theory suggests that as the North American ice sheet was melting, a gigantic glacial lake. Lake Agassiz, larger than all the modern Great Lakes combined, suddenly breached its ice dam. A colossal torrent of fresh, cold water surged into the North Atlantic, disrupting the ocean currents, the great conveyor belt that carry warm water north and regulate the climate of the Northern Hemisphere. The heat pump was effectively switched off. Another more controversial theory suggests the trigger wasn't of this world at all. Proponents of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis point to a thin layer of sediment found across 4 continents dating to precisely 12,800 years ago. This layer contains unusual materials, nanodiamonds, microscopic spherules of melted rock, and elevated levels of iridium, all potential chemical fingerprints of a cometary airburst or impact. The idea is that a fragmented comet exploded over the North American ice sheet, triggering continent-wide wildfires, destabilizing the ice and kicking off the sudden deep freeze. It's a dramatic and terrifying scenario, one that sounds like something out of a disaster movie, but it has a growing body of evidence to support it. One quirky fact from this period is the mass extinction of megafauna. The woolly mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, the giant sloths, they all vanished right around the start of the Younger Dryas. Whatever happened, it was a brutal event for life on Earth, so the world freezes over again for about 1,200 years. And then just as suddenly as it began, the Younger Dryas ends. Around 11,600 years ago, the exact date Plato gives for the sinking of Atlantis, the planet's thermostat lurches in the other direction with astonishing speed. The warming is incredibly rapid. Ice cores from Greenland show that regional temperatures may have jumped by as much as 10 degrees Celsius in a single decade. The great ice sheets, which had restabilized during the cold snap, now began to melt at a catastrophic rate. This triggered what geologists call Meltwater Pulse 1b. It was not a gentle, gradual sea level rise. It was a deluge. Coastlines that had been stable for a millennium were suddenly and violently inundated. Entire landscapes were reshaped in a geological blink of an eye. The sheer weight of the ice sheets had also depressed the Earth's crust, and as they melted, the land began to rebound, triggering massive earthquakes and volcanic activity. The world of 11,600 years ago was a geologically unstable, violently flooding planet. It was, in short, the perfect setting for a powerful island empire to be swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Plato's story, when viewed through this geological lens, suddenly seems less like an allegorical fantasy and more like a shockingly accurate memory of a specific period of global upheaval. And it's not the only story of its kind. You find echoes of this catastrophic flooding everywhere. The Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia tells of a great flood sent by the gods to wipe out humanity. The Hindu scriptures describe the Pralaya, a cyclical dissolution of the universe that often involves a world-engulfing flood. The biblical story of Noah's Ark is perhaps the most famous. Across cultures, from the Aboriginal tribes of Australia to the native peoples of the Americas, there are over 500 flood myths, all telling a similar story of a time when the waters rose up and washed the world away. Scholars still argue whether these myths are independent creations or if they represent a shared collective human memory of the very real, very traumatic flooding that occurred at the end of the last ice age. Could the story of Atlantis be the most detailed and specific of all these surviving accounts? A memory of a real place passed down for millennia until it finally reached a philosopher in Athens. The memory of a global flood, a great reset, echoes in myths all over the world. But myths are not evidence. You can't excavate a story. If a great coastal civilization like Atlantis was truly swallowed by the sea 11,600 years ago, then somewhere beneath the waves and the silt of millennia, there should be something left. A wall, a foundation, a single worked stone that proves it wasn't just a philosopher's dream. So you pull on a wetsuit, you check the gauge on your oxygen tank, and you descend into the deep blue, leaving the world of sunlight and speculation behind for the silent crushing pressure of the abyss. The search for Atlantis has driven countless expeditions into the sea, from the Aegean to the Caribbean, each one hoping to find that one piece of definitive proof. Your first dive takes you to the warm turquoise waters of the Bahamas, just off the coast of North Bimini Island. This is the site of one of the most famous and controversial underwater discoveries ever made, the Bimini Road. In 1968, a diver spotted what looked for all the world like a man-made pavement or road running along the seabed about 18 feet down. You swim over it now, and it's easy to see why it caused such a sensation. It's a J-shaped formation of massive, roughly rectangular limestone blocks, some as long as 16 feet fitted together in a neat line that stretches for nearly half a mile. It looks deliberate. It feels ancient. For many, this was it. This was the smoking gun. The location even seemed to fit the prophecies of the American psychic Edgar Cayce, who had predicted in the 1930s that remnants of Atlantis would be discovered near Bimini. The story was just too perfect. You swim closer, running your hand over the rough surface of one of the stones. Proponents of the road, being a man-made structure, point to the apparent precision of the blocks. They seem too uniform, too well-fitted to be a random act of nature. Some have even claimed to find multi-layered constructions prop stones placed underneath larger blocks for support, and even what they interpret as markings from ancient tools. The debate became a classic showdown between two fundamentally different ways of seeing the world. Was this a remnant of a lost civilization, or a fascinating but entirely natural geological feature? You can almost hear the gentle sarcasm in a geologist's voice as they say, yes, and it's also perfectly aligned with the summer solstice if you stand on one foot and squint. For several decades, geologists have been taking a closer look, and their explanation is far less romantic. The overwhelming scientific consensus is that the Bimini Road is a classic example of beach rock. You've seen it before, even if you don't know the name. It's when sand shells and other sediments in the intertidal zone, the area between high and low tide, get cemented together by calcium carbonate. This rock forms in layers, and as the sea level changes and erosion takes its toll, it can fracture along straight lines, breaking into remarkably geometric block-like shapes. Core samples drilled directly from the Bimini blocks confirm this. They show a consistent internal structure with shells and sediments layered in a way that is characteristic of natural formation, not of being quarried from a different location and placed there. Crucially, in over 50 years of searching, no one has ever found a single associated artifact. No tools, no pottery, no inscriptions that would definitively link the structure to human hands. The Bimini Road is a geological Rorschach test. You see what you want to see. And for now, the hard science says it's a beautiful, intriguing, but ultimately natural formation. So, you surface a little disappointed and travel halfway around the world to the coast of Gujarat in India. Here, another legend of a sunken city tantalizes archaeologists, the city of Dwarka. According to the ancient Hindu epic, the Mahabharata, Dwarka was a magnificent fortified city built by the god Krishna. It was a golden metropolis, meticulously planned and fabulously wealthy. But after Krishna departed the mortal world, the story goes that the sea rose up and reclaimed the entire city, sparing only his personal residence. A dredging operation was mounted, and it pulled up a collection of artifacts, including pottery shards, beads, hearth materials, and most importantly, pieces of fossilized wood and human bone. One of these wooden artifacts was sent for carbon dating. The result came back at around 7,500 BC. That's 9,500 years ago. This is where the scholarly debate explodes. If this date is accurate, it would mean a vast city existed in India 5,000 years before the Great Indus Valley Civilization, which was previously thought to be the subcontinent's first urban culture. It would rewrite the history books. Skeptics are quick to urge caution. The currents in the Gulf of Cambay are notoriously powerful, and they argue that the dredged artifacts could have been washed down from rivers and deposited over thousands of years, not necessarily originating from a city in that spot. For centuries, Dwarka was considered pure myth. But in the 1980s, the pioneering Indian marine archaeologist S. R. Rao began conducting underwater excavations off the coast of the modern city of Dwarka. He found submerged walls, stone pillars, and anchors that suggested a large ancient port had indeed been lost to the sea. The truly stunning discovery, however, came in 2001, much further offshore in the Gulf of Cambay. A team from India's National Institute of Ocean Technology was conducting a survey of the seabed looking for pollution when their side-scan sonar picked up something astonishing. Nearly 120 feet below the surface, they found enormous, distinctly geometric structures stretching for 5 miles. The sonar images showed what appeared to be the foundations of massive buildings, grand plazas, and riverbeds from a time when this area was dry land. They also suggest the geometric structures seen on sonar could still be natural formations. Without more extensive on-site excavation, which is incredibly difficult at that depth and in those currents, it's impossible to be certain. Unlike Bimini, however, Dwarka refuses to be easily dismissed. The combination of a deeply rooted local myth, tangible onshore ruins, and highly suggestive offshore sonar data makes it a profound enigma. It represents the blurry, exciting frontier where legend and archaeology meet, reminding you that sometimes the old stories might just be pointing the way to a history we are only beginning to rediscover from the clutches of the sea. You leave the murky depths behind, leaving the mysteries of Dwarka and Bimini for the ocean to keep. The problem with underwater evidence is that it's always ambiguous, degraded by time and tide. To find a clearer picture of this lost world, you need to go somewhere the evidence hasn't been washed away. You need solid ground. And so you travel inland to the arid, rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, not far from the Syrian border. The landscape is ancient, baked by the sun, a place that has seen the birth of civilizations. But you're not heading to a famous ruin or a grand walled city. You're heading to a strange pot-bellied hill that until a few decades ago was just a local landmark used by shepherds to graze their flocks. The locals called it Göbekli Tepe, which means pot-belly hill. And buried just beneath its surface was a secret that would fundamentally change our understanding of the ancient world. Excavations began here in the mid-1990s, led by the German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt. And what he and his team uncovered was nothing short of revolutionary. It wasn't a city. It wasn't a village. There were no houses, no hearths, no signs of domestic life whatsoever. It was a temple. Or more accurately, a vast megalithic sanctuary, a complex of at least 20 circular enclosures built on a scale that was previously thought impossible for its time. You walk through the excavated site now, and the feeling is otherworldly. You are surrounded by massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some standing over 16 feet tall and weighing up to 20 tons. They are arranged in circles like silent petrified giants, gathered for some long-forgotten ritual. The craftsmanship is astonishing. The pillars are sleek, precisely carved, and many are decorated with intricate high-relief carvings of animals. You run your hand over the cool stone, tracing the outline of a snarling leopard, a powerful bull, a cunning fox. There are boars, gazelles, snakes, and vultures. The art is not primitive or crude. It's sophisticated and stylized, imbued with a powerful symbolic energy. What's truly baffling is that these are not just pictures of animals. The T-shaped pillars are clearly anthropomorphic. They have stylized arms, carved along their sides, with hands and fingers resting just above what looks like a loincloth. These are not just stones. They are beings, gods, ancestors, or priests frozen in eternal congregation. Mainstream historians have long held that complex religion and monumental architecture were a result of the agricultural revolution. First, you get farming, which leads to surplus food. That allows people to settle down in one place, creating villages and then cities. This social complexity then gives rise to organized religion, a priestly class, and the labor force needed to build big things like temples. It was a neat, orderly progression. Göbekli Tepe obliterates that timeline. The site has been reliably dated to around 9,600 BC. That's 11,600 years ago. Let that sink in. This complex was built 6,000 years before Stonehenge, 7,000 years before the first pyramids in Egypt. And crucially, it was built by a society of hunter-gatherers. There is no evidence of cultivated grains or domesticated animals found at the site. These people were hunting wild game and gathering wild plants. The sheer logistical challenge is mind-boggling. How did a pre-agricultural society, without the wheel, without metal tools, and without a settled population to feed a large workforce, manage to quarry transport and erect hundreds of multi-ton stone pillars? It's a classic chicken and egg problem, and Göbekli Tepe has completely scrambled the recipe. The scholarly debate now rages. Did organized religion spark the invention of agriculture rather than the other way around? Did these hunter-gatherer bands come together for seasonal rituals at this central cathedral on a hill, and the need to feed all those people for an extended period of time spur the innovation of farming? Did belief build the first city? As you wander from one circular enclosure to another, you notice something else that's strange. The site wasn't destroyed by invaders or toppled by an earthquake. Sometime around 8000 BC, after more than 1,000 years of use, the entire complex was deliberately and carefully buried. The creators of Göbekli Tepe, or their descendants, filled in every circle with tons of dirt rubble and animal bones, entombing their sacred creation under the very hill it was built on. Why? Why would a culture spend centuries, perhaps millennia, building such a magnificent sanctuary, only to painstakingly bury it? It's one of the site's most profound mysteries. Was it a ritual act, a way of decommissioning a sacred space once its power had faded? Was it an attempt to hide it from some new encroaching culture with different beliefs? Or was it an act of preservation, a cultural time capsule deliberately sealed so that it might survive the ages? This act of burial is the reason Göbekli Tepe survived in such pristine condition for nearly 12,000 years, waiting for us to find it. The presence of a site, this complex, this old, and this sophisticated, opens up a Pandora's box of questions. It proves that Stone Age hunter-gatherers were capable of a level of abstract thought, social organization, and engineering prowess far beyond what was previously imagined. A quirky tidbit is the sheer number of vulture carvings at the site, often depicted alongside headless human figures. This has led some researchers to speculate that Göbekli Tepe was part of an elaborate funerary cult where bodies were left on the hilltops to be consumed by vultures, a practice known as excarnation, common in Zoroastrianism and Tibetan Buddhism much later in history. The soul carried to the heavens by the sacred bird. For those who believe in a lost advanced civilization, Göbekli Tepe is a potential candidate for a survivor site. Could the knowledge to build something like this have been brought to this region by the scattered remnants of a more advanced culture that was destroyed in the cataclysms at the end of the Ice Age? Was this a place where ancient knowledge was being preserved and passed on? Or was Göbekli Tepe, the spark itself, the birthplace of a new way of thinking, the very beginning of the world we now inhabit? Whatever the answer, Potbelly Hill stands as a silent, stony rebuke to anyone who thinks we have the story of our own past figured out. From the dusty hills of Anatolia, you travel south following the ancient corridors of human migration into the fertile Nile Valley. You stand now before the last surviving wonder of the ancient world, the Great Pyramid of Giza. The sheer scale of it is almost impossible to process. 2.5 million blocks of stone, some weighing as much as 80 tons, fitted together with a precision that modern builders would struggle to replicate. The mainstream Egyptological consensus is firm: the Giza Plateau, with its 3 iconic pyramids, and the enigmatic Sphinx, was a grand necropolis built around 2500 BC during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom. The Great Pyramid was the tomb of the pharaoh Khufu, the 2nd pyramid for his son Khafre, and the 3rd for Menkaure. It's a story of monumental funerary architecture, a testament to the organizational power and religious devotion of the early Egyptian state. A quirky but well-documented fact is that the workers who built these monuments were not slaves, as is often depicted in movies, but skilled, well-fed laborers who lived in a purpose-built city nearby and took great pride in their work. We've found their bakeries, their breweries, and even their medical facilities. It's a neat, well-supported narrative. And yet, as you gaze up at these immense structures, nagging questions begin to surface, whispers of a much deeper, more complex history. The first whisper comes from the Great Pyramid's almost supernatural alignment. It is oriented to true north with an accuracy of within 3/60ths of a degree. This level of precision is astounding, especially for a culture that supposedly lacked the compass or advanced astronomical tools. How did they achieve it? And why was such perfect cardinal alignment so important? It suggests a profound understanding of geodesy and astronomy, a mastery that seems almost out of place for the era. Then your gaze shifts to the silent, watchful figure crouched in front of the pyramids, the Great Sphinx. The face, though weathered, is widely believed to be that of the pharaoh Khafre, linking the monument firmly to his pyramid. But in the 1990s, a geologist named Robert Schoch threw a geological wrench into that tidy timeline. Schoch wasn't an Egyptologist. He was an expert in rock weathering and erosion. And when he looked at the Sphinx, and more importantly, the limestone enclosure from which it was carved, he saw something that didn't fit the 2500 BC date. He saw the telltale signs of heavy, prolonged rainfall. You can see the deep vertical fissures and undulating rounded profiles in the bedrock of the enclosure wall. This is classic precipitation-induced erosion. The problem? The Giza Plateau has been a hyperarid desert for the last 5,000 years. The kind of sustained heavy rainfall needed to create these weathering patterns hasn't fallen in that region since the end of the last ice age, a period from roughly 10,000 BC to 5,000 BC. Schoch's argument is purely geological. the body of the Sphinx and the walls of its enclosure must be thousands of years older than the accepted date. He suggests an original structure was carved in this much earlier wetter period, and that the pharaoh Khafra simply came along thousands of years later and recarved the head in his own image, which would explain why the head is disproportionately small for the massive lion's body. The scholarly debate that ensued was and remains fierce. Egyptologists counter that localized Nile flooding wind erosion and even the poor quality of the limestone bedrock could account for the unusual weathering patterns. They point out that there is zero archaeological evidence, no pottery, no tools, no inscriptions from that earlier period at the Giza site to support Shulka's claim. And yet the geological evidence of water erosion remains a stubborn, inconvenient fact that is difficult to explain away. The mystery deepens when you turn your gaze from the earth to the sky. In their book, The Orion Mystery, authors Robert Bauval and Adrian Gilbert proposed another radical idea, the Orion correlation theory. They argue that the layout of the three Giza pyramids is not random. It's a map of the three stars in Orion's belt. The two larger pyramids, Khufu and Khafre, are in a near-perfect diagonal line, but the third smaller pyramid of Menkaure is slightly offset to the east. This layout precisely mirrors the alignment of the three stars in Orion's belt. Furthermore, the theory suggests that the Giza complex as a whole, the pyramids representing Orion's belt, and the Nile River representing the Milky Way, is a terrestrial map of the heavens, but not the heavens of 2500 BC. Due to the precession of the equinoxes, the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, the constellations gradually shift their position in the sky over a 26,000-year cycle. Bauval calculated that the Giza pyramids align perfectly with Orion's belt as it would have appeared on the horizon at the spring equinox in the year 10,500 BC. This date, deep in the Ice Age, is uncannily close to Plato's timeline for Atlantis and the period of intense climate change we discussed earlier. For the ancient Egyptians, the constellation of Orion was the celestial embodiment of the god Osiris, the ruler of the underworld and rebirth. Could the pyramids have been designed as a grand funerary machine, intended to align the soul of the deceased pharaoh with his celestial counterpart, locking into a much more ancient sacred blueprint? Mainstream Egyptology largely rejects the Orion correlation theory as a form of pseudo-archaeology, pointing out that you can find patterns anywhere if you look hard enough, and that it relies on selectively choosing which monuments to include. Yet the visual correlation is undeniably compelling. And then there are the ancient Egyptian texts themselves, which speak of a time before the pharaohs, a golden age ruled by gods, followed by a transitional period ruled by semi-divine beings, known as the Shemsu-Hor, the followers of Horus. Mainstream history interprets these as mythological kings, but could they be the memory of a real pre-dynastic line of rulers, the inheritors of a much older tradition? When you put it all together, the Sphinx's water erosion, the pyramid's precision and celestial alignment, and the Egyptians' own legends of a remote ancestral agent paints a tantalizing, if unproven, picture. It suggests that the magnificent civilization of dynastic Egypt may not have sprung up fully formed from the Nile mud, but was perhaps the heir to a lost legacy, a deep ancestral knowledge that had its roots in a forgotten chapter of human history. Leaving the sun-scorched monuments of Giza behind you, travel northwest, back into Turkey, to the otherworldly region of Cappadocia. The landscape here is like something from a dream. Centuries of wind and water have eroded the soft volcanic tuff into a surreal expanse of cones pillars and whimsical spires known as fairy chimneys. It feels like you've stepped onto another planet. For millennia, people have carved their homes, churches, and monasteries directly into this soft rock, creating a unique and beautiful synthesis of nature and human ingenuity. But the most astonishing secret of Cappadocia isn't what you see on the surface. It's what lies hidden beneath your feet. You find a modest-looking stone building in the middle of a flat, unassuming plain. A guide unlocks a heavy door, and you step inside. There's a staircase leading down into the darkness. You begin your descent, the air growing cooler and smelling of damp earth and deep time. You are entering Derinkuyu, the largest and most famous of Cappadocia's incredible underground cities. The first level is spacious, almost like a normal cellar. You see stables with mangers carved from the rock for livestock. But then you descend further and further. The complex just keeps going down. Derinkuyu is a mind-bending 18-level subterranean labyrinth reaching a depth of nearly 280 feet. It is not a cave or a mine. It is a meticulously planned, vertically stacked city, hand-carved out of the volcanic rock. As you explore the twisting passageways, you are struck by the sheer complexity of the design. You walk through what were once living quarters, storage rooms with niches for food jars, and communal kitchens with blackened ceilings from ancient fires. You see wine and oil presses, a spacious church with a vaulted ceiling in the form of a cross, and even what appears to be a religious school with long stone benches. It is a completely self-contained world. The most critical feature is the ventilation system. Over 50 vertical shafts, some plunging the entire depth of the city, were bored from the surface to provide fresh air to even the lowest levels. You can stand at the opening of one and feel a faint, cool draft, a testament to the incredible engineering of its anonymous creators. Another shaft served as a deep well, providing a secure water source that couldn't be poisoned by an enemy on the surface. A mainstream historical fact is that these underground cities were used extensively by early Christians in the Byzantine era to hide from Arab raids between the 8th and 12th centuries AD. The presence of chapels and religious iconography confirms this later use. But the city's design tells a story of a much older, more primal fear. Derinkuyu was built for defense. As you navigate the narrow stooping corridors connecting the levels, you come across one of its most ingenious features: massive millstone-like doors. These are huge circular stone discs, weighing half a ton or more, that could be rolled from a recess in the wall to completely block a passageway. They have a small hole in the center, which historians speculate was used to spear any attacker who tried to dislodge the door from the other side. This was a fortress designed to be sealed from the inside, capable of sheltering up to 20,000 people along with their livestock and food supplies for months on end. The big question, the one that ignites a fierce scholarly debate, is who first built it and when. The conventional attribution for the earliest construction points to the Phrygians, an Indo-European people who dominated Anatolia around the 8th century before Christ. The Greek historian Xenophon, writing around 400 BC, mentions Anatolian people living in underground houses. Later, the Hittites, who were in the region even earlier, may have expanded or initiated the work. But some researchers argue for a much deeper antiquity. The level of planning, the sheer scale of the labor involved in excavating this multi-level city with simple tools suggests a long-standing tradition of subterranean engineering. Could the origins of Derinkuyu and other similar cities be far older, perhaps dating back to the climatic chaos at the end of the Ice Age? Imagine a world plagued by the kind of cataclysms we've discussed, sudden freezes, floods, perhaps even the fallout from a cometary impact that darkened the skies. In such a world, retreating underground would not be an act of paranoia. It would be the most logical survival strategy imaginable. A place like Derinkuyu would offer protection from extreme weather, from predators, and from other desperate hostile human groups. The stable, moderate temperature of the Earth would insulate its inhabitants from the brutal freezes and scorching heat of a wildly fluctuating climate. A quirky fringe idea popularized by some ancient astronaut theorists is that these cities were shelters from some kind of aerial threat or even cosmic radiation, but a more grounded explanation might be just as dramatic. Derinkuyu is not unique. It's just the biggest one we've found so far. There are hundreds of underground complexes in Cappadocia, at least 36 of which are full-fledged cities. Some are connected to each other by tunnels that stretch for miles, and new ones are still being discovered. In 2014, a massive, previously unknown underground city was found beneath the fortress of Nevşehir during a construction project. Initial surveys suggest it may be even larger than Derinkuyu. It's an entire subterranean culture whose true origins are lost to history. The written record is silent. We are left to wander these silent hand-carved halls, marveling at the skill and determination of the builders. They were clearly preparing for a long-term siege, a brutal reset from which they intended to emerge. We just don't know for sure what kind of apocalypse they were hiding from. You can walk through the grand courtyards, climb the monumental staircases, and stand in awe beneath towering Corinthian columns, some of the tallest ever erected in the classical world. The Roman craftsmanship is everywhere a testament to the power and piety of the empire. It is by any standard a world-class archaeological site. A mainstream historical fact is that construction of this grand Roman complex began under Emperor Augustus around the end of the 1st century BC and continued for over 200 years. The sheer scale was meant to be a statement of Roman dominance in this eastern province. But your attention is not on the Roman temples. It's on what they are built upon. The entire grand sanctuary, the massive courtyard, and the temples themselves rest on a raised platform, a podium of stone. And as you walk around to the western side of the complex, you come face to face with a mystery that makes the Roman architecture above it seem almost trivial. Embedded in the retaining wall of this platform are 3 of the most colossal worked stones on the planet. This is the Trilithon. You stand before 3 monolithic blocks of limestone, each measuring approximately 64 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet thick. They are estimated to weigh around 1,200 tons apiece. For perspective, the largest stones at Stonehenge weigh about 40 tons. The massive granite blocks in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid weigh between 50 and 80 tons. These stones at Baalbek are in a completely different league. They are cut with incredible precision and fitted together so perfectly that you can't slip a piece of paper between them. And they are not at ground level. They are elevated nearly 30 feet up in the air as part of a wall. The sheer engineering problem is staggering. How did an ancient culture quarry transport and lift 3 1,200-ton blocks into place with such accuracy? There are no surviving records from the Romans, who were meticulous record keepers, that describe how this was accomplished. This silence has led to one of the most enduring debates in archaeology. The conventional theory is that the Romans did it, They were, after all, master engineers who employed sophisticated cranes levers and massive amounts of manpower. Proponents of this view argue that by using a complex system of capstans and pulleys powered by hundreds of men, it was theoretically possible. Yet there is no direct evidence they ever moved anything on this scale anywhere else in their vast empire. It represents a quantum leap in engineering that is documented nowhere else. As if the Trilithon weren't baffling enough, you then take a short walk to the nearby quarry, about a quarter of a mile away. And there, the mystery deepens into sheer disbelief. Lying in the quarry, partially detached from the bedrock, is an even larger stone block. It is known as the Hajar al-Hibla, the stone of the pregnant woman. This single monolith is nearly 70 feet long and is estimated to weigh over 1,400 tons. And just a few years ago, another even bigger stone was discovered right next to it, still largely buried, with an estimated weight approaching a staggering 1,800 tons. This one is nicknamed the Rock of Ages, and for good reasons, among the largest single pieces of stone ever quarried by human hands. These stones were clearly intended for the temple platform, but they were abandoned in the quarry, perhaps because they cracked during the final stages of cutting. Their presence here only amplifies the question: who had the audacity to even attempt to move something this large? The debate over the origin of the Baalbek platform is intense. Was it a feat of forgotten Roman superengineering? Or are the Romans simply the last in a long line of cultures to build on a much older, more sacred site? Local legends, of course, offer more colorful explanations. Some attribute the construction to Solomon using jinn, or genies, to move the stones. Others say it was the work of a race of giants who lived before the Great Flood. This idea of pre-flood builders is a common theme in alternative history. A quirky tidbit is that the name Baalbek itself combines the name of the Canaanite sky god Baal with the local word for valley. The site was sacred long before the Romans arrived, dedicated to a regional fertility triad of deities. Those who question the Roman origin of the foundation point to the stark contrast in style and scale. The Trilithon stones are simple, massive, and unadorned part of a much larger foundation of enormous blocks. The Roman work, built on top of it, while magnificent, is made of much smaller, more manageable stones. It looks like one civilization building upon the incomprehensible work of another. Could this foundation be a relic of a much older lost civilization, one with a forgotten technology for megalithic construction? Was Baalbek, like Giza and Göbekli Tepe, a legacy site, the surviving fragment of a world that vanished? Standing in the shadow of the Trilithon, feeling the immense weight and impossible scale of the stones, it's hard to dismiss the question. You are not just looking at a wall. You are looking at the absolute limit of what we think the ancient world was capable of. And it's a limit that even today we cannot fully explain. From the colossal sun-baked stones of Baalbek, our journey takes us across continents once more to the edge of the Pacific. You submerge again, this time into the deep blue shark-infested waters off the coast of Yonaguni-jima, the southernmost of Japan's Ryukyu Islands. The currents here are strong and treacherous, known as the Kuroshio, or black tide. You're diving in a place where only experienced divers dare to go. And what you find here, about 80 feet below the surface, is perhaps the most fiercely debated underwater structure on the planet, the Yonaguni Monument. Discovered by a local dive tour operator in 1986, the site is a massive monolithic sandstone formation roughly the size of a football field. And as you swim along its length, it's impossible not to be struck by its seemingly artificial nature. It looks for all the world like a sunken pyramid or a grand terraced temple. You see vast flat platforms towering vertical walls that meet at sharp 90-degree angles, and what appears to be a monumental staircase, its steps perfectly proportioned, rising up the side of the main structure. You swim through a feature that locals have nicknamed the archway, two colossal stones leaning against each other. You see what looks like a carved channel or trench and a circular depression in the rock that has been dubbed the Turtle Rock due to its shape. The entire structure has a powerful architectural feel. It does not look like a random jumble of rocks. It looks designed. Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus, has spent years diving at the site and is its most vocal academic proponent. He is convinced it is a man-made, or at least man-modified structure. He claims to have identified quarry marks on the stone wedge holes consistent with ancient stone-cutting techniques, and even what he interprets as a form of rock art, including a carving that resembles a human face. He calls the structure a monument, not a formation, and believes it was a temple, a castle, or perhaps even a tomb for some ancient Pacific civilization. If Kimura is right, the implications are staggering. The geological consensus is that this sandstone formation was last above water at the end of the last ice age at least 10,000 years ago, before the post-glacial sea levels rose and submerged it. If it is man-made, then Yonaguni is a 10,000-year-old underwater city, a Japanese Atlantis, that predates the known origins of civilization in the region by millennia. It would be definitive proof of a sophisticated stone-building culture existing during the Jomon period of Japanese prehistory, a time when people were thought to be simple hunter-gatherer potters. A quirky fringe theory even connects Yonaguni to the legends of Mu or Lemuria, a mythical lost continent in the Pacific, the oceanic counterpart to Atlantis in the Atlantic. However, just as with the Bimini Road, there is a powerful and compelling counterargument from the world of geology. And its leading voice is none other than Robert Schoch, the same geologist who challenged the age of the Sphinx. Schoch has dived at Yonaguni multiple times, and while he is open to the idea of ancient civilizations, he has come to the firm conclusion that the monument is a natural formation. He points out that the rock type at Yonaguni is a very fine-grained sandstone part of a geological group that is known for fracturing along straight, clean plains. You can see similar sharp angles and terraced formations on the coast of the island above the water, where the natural forces of wave erosion are at work. Schoch argues that the steps, walls, and terraces are all the result of natural geological processes and the strong erosive power of the local ocean currents. Sandstone is a sedimentary rock formed in layers, and he believes it has simply broken apart along its natural bedding planes. He sees the quarry marks and carvings as natural scratches and formations easily explained by erosion and bioerosion from marine life. The scholarly debate over Yonaguni is particularly sharp because both sides are led by credentialed geologists looking at the same evidence and coming to diametrically opposed conclusions. It's a perfect example of how difficult it is to interpret underwater evidence and how easily our human tendency to see patterns can influence our judgment. We are hardwired to see faces in clouds and order in chaos. Are we seeing the ghost of a lost city at Yonaguni? Or are we just looking at a spectacular but entirely natural geological wonder? You swim around a sharp 90-degree corner of the main terrace, It feels so perfect, so intentional. It's hard to shake the feeling that a human hand must have shaped this. And yet you know that nature is full of strange geometries, the perfect hexagonal columns of the Giant's Causeway in Ireland, the crystalline structures of minerals. Nature is a patient and powerful architect. Mainstream archaeology, for the most part, sides with Shemsu-Hor. Without any corroborating evidence, no tools, no pottery, no bones, nothing but the stone structure itself. The claim of a 10,000-year-old sunken city remains an extraordinary one, and it lacks the extraordinary evidence required to support it. Yet the mystery endures. Yonaguni sits there in the deep silent blue, a geological sphinx posing a riddle. Man-made or natural? A lost chapter of history or a trick of the light in the tide? As you begin your ascent, leaving the enigmatic terraces behind, you realize that the monument, whatever its origin, serves as a powerful reminder of how much of our planet's past lies submerged just beyond our easy reach in a realm where the lines between what is built and what is natural can become hopelessly, beautifully blurred. You surface from the churning waters off Yonaguni, the debate between geologists still ringing in your ears. The search for physical ruin stone and mortar earth, and gold is one path to the past. But there's a parallel quest that has driven explorers not into the sea or under the earth, but into the remote mystical landscapes of the human mind. This is the search for a different kind of lost world, the hidden kingdom, the perfect society that exists not as a memory of what was, but as a promise of what could be. And in the thin, cold air of the Himalayas, this quest finds its ultimate expression in the legend of Shambhala. You find yourself trekking through the breathtaking, desolate beauty of the Tibetan plateau. The sky is a shade of blue you've never seen before, and the silence is broken only by the wind whistling through prayer flags and the crunch of your boots on the gravelly terrain. Shambhala, in the traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, is a mythical kingdom hidden somewhere deep within the Himalayas or Central Asia. It is not a place of material wealth like Atlantis, but of spiritual enlightenment. The legend comes primarily from the texts of the Kalachakra Tantra, a complex and esoteric body of teachings. These texts describe Shambhala with a precision that rivals Plato's description of his lost island. It is a perfect kingdom, shaped like an 8-petaled lotus flower, with a capital city called Kalapa at its center. Its people are wise and compassionate, its rulers are enlightened bodhisattvas, and it serves as the secret repository of the most profound teachings of Buddhism. Shambhala is not a ghost from the past. It is a beacon for the future. The prophecy states that as the outside world descends into an age of war, greed, and materialism, a dark age known as the Kali Yuga, the 25th king of Shambhala will emerge with a great army to defeat the forces of darkness and usher in a new worldwide golden age of peace and wisdom. It's a powerful and deeply appealing myth, a promise of an ultimate spiritual reset. For devout Buddhists, Shambhala is a real place, though it may exist on a spiritual or energetic plane, accessible only to those with the proper karmic disposition. You can't just buy a plane ticket and show up at the gates of Kalapa. The journey is an internal one, but that hasn't stopped people from trying to find it on a map. The story of Shambhala has captivated the Western imagination for centuries, becoming a kind of spiritual El Dorado. Explorers, mystics, and adventurers have all mounted expeditions into the uncharted territories of Tibet and the Gobi Desert, convinced they could find a physical gateway to this hidden realm. A quirky and rather dark tidbit of this history involves the Nazi Ahnenerbe, In 1938, Heinrich Himmler, a man obsessed with esoteric lore and the occult, dispatched an expedition to Tibet, led by Ernst Schaefer. While the expedition's official purpose was scientific anthropological and zoological research, its underlying motive was to search for the origins of the Aryan race and to tap into the supposed ancient wisdom and mystical power of the East. They measured Tibetan skulls, collected artifacts, and documented rituals, all filtered through their twisted racial ideology. For Himmler and other Nazi mystics, Shambhala, or a similar hidden kingdom like Agartha, was a real place, a source of immense power that could be harnessed for their cause. It's a chilling example of how a beautiful spiritual myth can be co-opted and perverted by a malevolent ideology. The idea of a hidden world, a secret society of enlightened masters guiding humanity from behind the scenes, is not unique to Tibet. You find echoes of it everywhere. The parallel myth of Agartha speaks of a vast subterranean empire with its capital also sometimes called Shambhala, located at the Earth's core. This idea became popular in the West through the writings of 19th century occultists and is often linked to the Hollow Earth theory. These stories, from the Theosophical Society's belief in a great white brotherhood of spiritual adepts to James Hilton's famous 1933 novel Lost Horizon, which gave us the word Shangri-La, all tap into the same deep human yearning. They are a counter-narrative to the relentless march of industrial modernity, a belief that somewhere there is a place that has preserved the ancient harmony and wisdom that we have lost. The scholarly debate around Shambhala is of course not about its physical existence, but about its origins and meaning. Historians see the legend as a powerful allegory, a tool for preserving Buddhist teachings during times of persecution, and a source of profound hope and inspiration. The story may have been inspired by real historically advanced cultures in Central Asia, such as the Zhangzhung Kingdom or the Kushan Empire, their memory embellished and mythologized over time. Mainstream scholars view the Nazi search for Shambhala not as a legitimate quest, but as a reflection of the profound irrationality and pseudo-scientific mysticism that lay at the heart of the Third Reich. As you sit in a quiet monastery, listening to the low chanting of the monks, you realize that the quest for Shambhala is fundamentally different from the search for Atlantis. The search for Atlantis is about finding a lost golden age in the past, a physical place we can reclaim. The search for Shambhala is about finding a golden age in the future, a state of being we can aspire to. And yet they both spring from the same source, a feeling that the world we see is not all there is. That just beyond the veil of our ordinary reality, whether it's under the ocean, deep within the earth, or hidden behind a remote mountain pass, lies a secret that could change everything. It's the enduring human quest for a lost key, a forgotten piece of knowledge that will unlock our own potential and perhaps reset our own flawed world. You pull back from the misty peaks of the Himalayas, leaving the spiritual promise of Shambhala behind. The journey so far has been intoxicating, a whirlwind of sunken cities, buried temples, celestial alignments, and impossible megaliths. It's easy to get swept up in the romance of it all, to connect the dots and see the faint outline of a great forgotten mother culture, an Atlantis that seeded the world with its wisdom before being wiped from the face of the earth. It's a compelling, elegant, and powerful story. And now, it's time for a reality check. You walk into a different kind of temple. The quiet, fluorescent-lit halls of a university archaeology department. The air here doesn't smell of ancient stone and sea salt. It smells of old books, coffee, and skepticism. This is the home of the sober voice of mainstream archaeology, and it has some difficult questions for you. The first and most significant challenge it poses is a simple one. Where is the stuff? A truly global advanced civilization, even one that existed 12,000 years ago, should have left behind more than just a handful of enigmatic stone structures. Think about the Roman Empire. They existed 2,000 years ago, and their physical footprint is still all over Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. You can't dig a subway in Rome without hitting a Roman pot. We have their roads, their aqueducts, their coins, their tools, their writings, their pottery, an overwhelming mountain of material culture. A civilization advanced enough to build Baalbek or chart the stars with the precision of Giza would have had everyday objects, and those objects should be turning up, at least occasionally, in archaeological digs all over the world. But they aren't. There is a deafening silence in the archaeological record where this advanced pre-Ice Age culture should be. We find plenty of hunter-gatherer spear points and flint tools from that era, but no orichalcum circuit boards or advanced alloys. This leads to the second major objection, the problem of cultural continuity. Let's assume a great cataclysm did occur, wiping out 99% of this advanced civilization. Survivors, as the theory goes, would have scattered across the globe, carrying the seeds of their knowledge with them, kick-starting the known civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley. But if that were the case, we should see a clear shared inheritance among these early cultures. We should find startling similarities in their language, their writing systems, their artistic styles, and their core technologies. While there are some broad thematic similarities in myths like the flood stories, the specifics are wildly different. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs have no connection to Sumerian cuneiform. Their pottery styles, architectural methods, and religious pantheons are distinct and clearly show a long period of local development. Mainstream archaeology argues that these civilizations grew organically and independently, their roots deep in their own local prehistoric soil, not from a common transplanted seed. The scholarly debate on this point is central. Diffusion versus independent invention. Did ideas spread from a single source, or did different peoples come up with similar solutions to similar problems on their own? The overwhelming evidence points to the latter. Then, there's the biological evidence. Modern genetics allows us to trace human migration patterns with incredible precision. We can map how different haplogroups, which are genetic populations with a common ancestor, spread out across the globe. These genetic maps show a gradual branching expansion out of Africa, not the sudden dispersal of a single highly advanced population from a central point like the Atlantic. There is no Atlantean gene that suddenly appears in Egypt and Mesoamerica 12,000 years ago. A mainstream historical fact often cited in this context is the development of agriculture. Genetic studies of domesticated plants and animals show that farming wasn't a single idea that spread from one place. It was independently invented in at least 7 different locations around the world, from the Fertile Crescent to China to the Andes, over a period of several thousand years. This again supports a model of localized innovation, not a legacy of inherited knowledge. Proponents of the lost civilization theory often point to our own modern world as a counter-argument. If our civilization were wiped out by a cataclysm today, what would be left in 12,000 years? Our skyscrapers would be dust. Our computers would be corroded messes. Our books would have all decayed. Only our most massive stone structures like Mount Rushmore or the foundations of our dams might survive. This is a fair point. But as skeptics will quickly add, we would also leave behind a nearly indestructible layer of plastic waste radioactive isotopes from nuclear testing and billions of fossilized urban rats. Our global impact is unmistakable and would be visible in the geological record. An ancient civilization, even a highly advanced one, should have left a similar, unambiguous layer of its own. A quirky but illustrative example is the Antikythera mechanism, an astonishingly complex astronomical clock recovered from a Roman-era shipwreck. For a long time, it was a complete anomaly, a piece of technology so advanced it seemed out of place by 1,000 years. It looked like evidence of forgotten knowledge. But over time, other texts and discoveries have helped us place it in context, showing that Hellenistic Greek engineering was far more sophisticated than we had once believed. It didn't require a lost civilization to explain it. It just required us to adjust our understanding of a known one. This is the approach mainstream archaeology takes. It prefers to expand and refine the existing historical framework based on evidence rather than throwing the whole model out in favor of a more dramatic but unsupported one. It is a slow, methodical, and deeply cautious process. It lacks the thrilling narrative arc of the Atlantis story, but it is built on a foundation of tangible, verifiable data. It reminds you that for every truly profound mystery, like Göbekli Tepe, there are 100 that can be explained by the patient work of science without the need for giants aliens or a lost golden age. The arguments from mainstream archaeology are sobering, grounded in the hard data of what has been found versus what hasn't. The lack of a clear, continuous trail of artifacts is a powerful counterpoint to the idea of a single, lost mother culture. But what if we've just been looking in the wrong places or with the wrong eyes? For centuries, our view of the ancient world was limited to what we could see on the surface. We found ruins in the arid deserts of Egypt and the Middle East because they were visible, preserved by the dry climate. We believed that dense, inhospitable environments like the Amazon rainforest could never have supported large, complex societies. Small, scattered, semi-nomadic tribes that was the accepted wisdom. And that wisdom was completely wrong. You are now flying in a small plane, skimming just above a vast unbroken canopy of green. Below you is the Amazon rainforest, the lungs of the planet, a wilderness so immense and dense that it seems impossible for a city to hide there. But you are equipped with a new kind of sight. Mounted to the aircraft is a LiDAR system, light detection and ranging. It fires millions of laser pulses per second down towards the forest floor. Most of the pulses are reflected by the leaves and branches, but a few find their way through the gaps, hit the ground, and bounce back. A sophisticated computer takes this data and digitally strips away the vegetation, revealing the naked topographical truth of the land beneath. And what it's revealing is rewriting the history of the Americas. In the Upano Valley of eastern Ecuador, an area long thought to be sparsely populated, LiDAR has recently unveiled a breathtaking discovery. A vast interconnected network of cities that flourished for over 1,000 years, starting around 500 BC. This wasn't a collection of small villages. It was a low-density urban landscape stretching for hundreds of square miles. You can see the digital ghost of it on the screen in front of you. There are over 6,000 rectangular earthen platforms, where homes and ceremonial buildings once stood clustered together and connected by a stunningly complex web of wide straight roads and causeways cut deep into the landscape. There are plazas, irrigation canals, and agricultural terraces. It is the signature of a large, organized, and highly engineered society, a civilization that we had absolutely no idea existed until now. It has been hiding in plain sight, completely veiled by the jungle for centuries. And this is not an isolated case. Travel north to the Llanos de Mojos, a savanna region in Bolivia that experiences seasonal flooding. Here, LIDAR has uncovered another ancient surprise. For over 2 millennia, from about 500 BC to 1450 AD, the Kasarabi culture built a network of monumental sites. They constructed large, conical clay pyramids, U-shaped ceremonial mounds, and extensive defensive works. To manage the seasonal floods, they engineered thousands of miles of raised causeways to connect their settlements and vast systems of canals and reservoirs for agriculture. This was a sophisticated landscape domestication, a society that had learned to master and reshape its challenging environment on an epic scale. Percy Fawcett's City of Z might not have been a legend after all. He may have just been in the right church, but the wrong pew searching for stone ruins in a land of earthen engineers. The implications of these discoveries are profound. They shatter the old colonial-era myth of an empty or pristine Amazonian wilderness. The rainforest is not a virgin landscape. It is in many places a vast ancient garden profoundly shaped and managed by human hands for millennia. And it proves that large, complex civilizations can exist and vanish in places we never thought to look. If a society of this scale can disappear under a blanket of trees, what might disappear under a blanket of water or sand? A quirky but fascinating aspect of this research is the discovery of terra preta, or black earth. These are patches of incredibly fertile man-made soil found throughout the Amazon basin. Ancient peoples created this soil by mixing charcoal pottery shards and organic waste, creating a permanent agricultural base that allowed large populations to thrive. It's another sign of a sophisticated long-term environmental engineering. The new tools of discovery are not limited to LIDAR. Satellite imagery allows archaeologists to become digital explorers, scanning vast, inaccessible areas from their computer screens. In the deserts of Egypt and across the Sahara, geometric anomalies and the faint outlines of buried structures visible only from space have pinpointed hundreds of potential new archaeological sites. In Central Asia, satellite photos have revealed huge ancient earthworks, geoglyphs, similar to the Nazca lines in Peru, but thousands of years older, whose purpose remains a complete mystery. Even Antarctica, the most remote and inhospitable continent, is not immune to speculation. Subglacial radar surveys have mapped the mountain ranges and valleys, buried under miles of ice like the Gamburtsev Mountains, a range as large as the Alps that no human has ever seen. While claims of buried cities, they belong firmly to the fringe. The simple fact is that we are just beginning to map a continent that was not always covered in ice. The scholarly debate has shifted. It's no longer a question of if there were large complex societies that we've lost, but how many and what did they look like? The LIDAR discoveries in the Amazon don't prove the existence of Atlantis, but they do prove our capacity for being spectacularly wrong about the past. They inject a necessary dose of humility into our historical models. They show that societies can be lost not through a single dramatic cataclysm, but through the slow, inexorable creep of nature. A jungle can swallow a city just as effectively as an ocean can. These new technologies are peeling back the veil, showing us a human past that is far richer, more varied, and more widespread than the history books ever told us. The world is full of ghosts, and we are finally building the tools to see them. The ghosts revealed by LiDAR are reshaping the known history of the last few thousand years. But another recent discovery has sent a shockwave even deeper into the past, challenging the very timeline of human presence in the Americas. You travel to White Sands National Park in New Mexico. It's a stunning landscape of brilliant white gypsum sand dunes stretching as far as the eye can see. It feels timeless. But embedded within the layers of this ancient lakebed is a story that has forced a radical rewriting of the American chapter of human history. For decades, the mainstream scientific consensus, known as the Clovis First model, held that the first humans arrived in the Americas around 13,000 years ago. They were big game hunters who crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia and then spread rapidly southward. The evidence for this was the widespread discovery of distinctive fluted stone spear points known as Clovis points. For a long time, these were the oldest undisputed human artifacts found in the New World. But in 2021, a team of scientists studying the layers of sediment at White Sands found something incredible: human footprints. These weren't fossilized bones or stone tools. They were the ephemeral, unmistakable impressions of feet that had walked across the muddy shores of this ancient lake. You kneel down and look at the preserved tracks. You can see the outlines of adults, and more poignantly, the smaller prints of children and teenagers. You can almost imagine the scene: a family walking along the water's edge, the children splashing and playing, leaving their marks in the soft mud. The real bombshell came from the dating. The footprints were found in a layer of earth that contained ancient seeds from an aquatic plant, which could be accurately radiocarbon dated. The results were unambiguous. The footprints were between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. This single discovery pushes back the timeline of human arrival in the Americas by at least 10,000 years. It means that people were living in New Mexico during the absolute height of the last ice age, a time when massive ice sheets would have made any overland journey from Siberia incredibly difficult, if not impossible. The scholarly debate around this is electric. How did they get there? Did they migrate down the Pacific coast in boats hopping from island to island and exploiting marine resources long before the inland ice-free corridor opened up? The White Sands discovery provides firm evidence for a deep pre-Clovis human presence, something that had been suggested by other controversial sites for years, but never proven so definitively. It's a powerful reminder of how quickly the story of the deep past can change with a single, well-dated discovery. What we think we know for certain today can become a historical footnote tomorrow. A quirky but very human detail about the White Sands footprints is that some of the tracks are from a woman, and they show her carrying a toddler. She walks for a distance, then sets the child down, and the child's tiny footprints appear alongside hers for a while before she picks the child up again. It's a snapshot of everyday life, a moment of tender humanity preserved for 23 millennia. This constant rewriting of the timeline is exactly what keeps the search for lost civilizations so compelling. If we were so wrong about something as fundamental as when people first set foot in the Americas, could we also be wrong about the origins of civilization itself? The discoveries are pushing human history back, but they are also pushing back the history of human intelligence and capability. Think back to Göbekli Tepe at 9,600 BC, already an astonishingly ancient example of monumental construction. But go back further. In Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists have found pieces of engraved ochre and shell beads dating back 75,000 years. This is evidence of abstract thought of art and symbolism at a time when modern humans were just beginning their great migration out of Africa. In a cave in Indonesia, a painted image of a wild pig has been dated to at least 45,500 years ago, making it one of the oldest known examples of figurative art. These discoveries are chipping away at the old notion of a slow, linear progression of human intellect. Our ancestors weren't just primitive brutes struggling to survive. They were anatomically, and it seems intellectually identical to us for a very, very long time. They had the same brains, the same capacity for innovation, symbolism, and complex thought that we do today. This raises a profound question. If modern humans have been smart for 50,000 or even 100,000 years, what were we doing for all that time? Why does civilization with its cities and agriculture seem to only switch on in the last 10,000 years, right after the end of the last ice age? The conventional answer is that the stable climate of the Holocene epoch was a necessary precondition. But the lost civilization hypothesis offers a more radical alternative. Perhaps it didn't just switch on once. Perhaps there were other attempts, other cycles of civilization during the long millennia of the Ice Age that rose and fell, their remnants erased by the grinding ice sheets and the subsequent global floods. We are left in a fascinating, uncertain space. The hard evidence from genetics and archaeology still doesn't support a single global Atlantis, but the ever-expanding timeline of human presence and ingenuity combined with the sheer scale of the known cataclysms our planet has endured leaves the door wide open for possibilities we haven't even begun to imagine. The discoveries at White Sands and in the Amazon are not the end of the story. They are the beginning of a new chapter. They prove that vast tracts of our history remain hidden not just in myth and legend, but buried under sand jungle and our own outdated assumptions. The past is not a settled, dusty thing. It is an active investigation, and we are constantly finding new clues. You find yourself standing at a crossroads, the journey's end. In one direction lies the well-lit, clearly marked path of conventional history, paved with peer-reviewed papers and cataloged artifacts. In the other, a fainter trail disappears into a misty forest of myth anomaly and tantalizing speculation. We have walked both paths tonight. We stood in Plato's Atlantis, a perfect city of concentric rings, and felt the tremors as it was swallowed by the sea. We saw how its supposed end, 11,600 years ago, aligns with a period of terrifying global chaos, the end of the younger Dryas, and the catastrophic floods of Meltwater Pulse 1b. This is the heart of the grand romantic hypothesis, that a great advanced civilization was brutally reset by a global cataclysm, leaving behind only fragmented memories and whispers that we now call myths. We chased those whispers across the globe. We descended into the silent blue world of the continental shelves, searching for proof. Off the coast of the Bahamas, we found the Bimini Road, a structure so geometrically suggestive, yet so convincingly explained by natural geology. Off the coast of India, the sonar ghosts of Dwarka presented a more ambiguous case, a blurry line where a potent national myth meets tantalizing but inconclusive data. We emerged onto dry land and were confronted by the impossible. At Göbekli Tepe, we wandered through a 12,000 years old temple built by hunter-gatherers, a sanctuary that defies the traditional timeline of human development and was deliberately buried as if to preserve a sacred memory. In Egypt, we question the age of the Sphinx, its water-weathered stones hinting at a much older story, while the Giza pyramids seem to mirror the stars of a forgotten ancient sky. We sought refuge from some unknown apocalypse deep beneath the earth in Cappadocia, in the 18-level subterranean city of Derinkuyu, a masterpiece of defensive engineering whose true origins remain shrouded in mystery. In Lebanon, we stood dwarfed by the Trilithon at Baalbek, 1,200-ton stones fitted with impossible precision, a foundation that seems to mock the Roman temple built on top of it. Off the coast of Japan, the Yonaguni monument presented us with a perfect geological riddle, a formation that is either a stunning natural wonder or a 10,000-year-old sunken city, depending entirely on which expert you believe. And we saw how this search for physical worlds is mirrored by the spiritual quest for hidden realms like Shambhala, a testament to our enduring belief in a wisdom that lies just beyond our grasp. But then came the necessary dose of skepticism. Mainstream archaeology, with its methodical evidence-based approach, reminds us of the profound silence in the material record. Where are the tools, the writings, the distinctive pottery of this supposed mother culture? Why do the world's first known civilizations in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley look so distinct so clearly, the product of their own unique local evolution? These are not trivial objections. They are the bedrock of the scientific method. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. And for a global advanced pre-Ice Age civilization, the direct, unambiguous evidence simply is not there. And yet, just as we were settling back into the comfortable established narrative, new technologies began to pull back the curtain on our own ignorance. LiDAR peeled away the Amazon's green veil to reveal vast ancient urban landscapes we never dreamed existed, proving that entire civilizations could be lost to the slow march of nature. And at White Sands, 23,000 years old, human footprints in the mud kicked the door of American prehistory wide open, reminding us with humbling force that our timelines are fragile, written in pencil, not in stone. So where does that leave us? Atlantis, as Plato described it, remains an unproven legend, a powerful story that is most likely a brilliant philosophical allegory woven with threads of genuine climate catastrophe memory. Many of the most famous underwater structures, like Bimini and likely Yonaguni, are probably natural formations, their architectural appearance a trick of geology and our own pattern-seeking minds. And the sober reality is that no lost super-civilization is required to explain the wonders we do know about. The genius of the ancient Egyptians, the organizational power of the Romans, and the spiritual drive of the builders of Göbekli Tepe are wonders enough on their own, a testament to the incredible and often underestimated capabilities of our ancestors. But the case is not closed. The lingering enigmas of Baalbek's foundation, Derinkuyu's origin, and Göbekli Tepe's sudden appearance remain profound challenges to our understanding. The flood of discoveries from remote sensing and the constant pushing back of human timelines create a fertile ground for new questions. The past is not a static, settled place. It is a living, breathing mystery, and we are still in the first early moments of its exploration. The invitation, then, is not to believe blindly in every myth, but to hold a space for the unknown. It is to test the bold ideas against the hard evidence, to keep questioning the standard model, and to remain open to the profound possibility that the Earth in its jungles, its deserts, its caves, and its deep silent seabeds, has many more secrets to reveal. The book of our shared history is still being written, and it is almost certain that the most astonishing chapters are yet to be discovered. The hum of the ancient library seems to have faded now, and the weight of the old leather-bound book feels heavy in your lap. The map of that lost world, with its impossible coastlines, lies on the floor beside you, a quiet invitation to keep dreaming, to keep wondering. The questions we've explored tonight don't have easy answers, and perhaps that is why they are so enduring, so powerful. They are not just questions about the deep past, but about our own place in the long, unfolding story of this world. They are a gentle reminder of both our incredible resilience and our profound fragility in the face of time and the immense impersonal forces of the planet we call home. The search is not just for lost cities, but for a lost piece of ourselves, for a deeper connection to the epic, mysterious, and still largely unread story of humanity. Now, as the last of these thoughts begins to drift and soften, allow the quiet of the night to settle around you, a comforting blanket of silence. Let the mysteries rest where they lie buried under millennia of earth and water, waiting patiently for a time when we might understand them a little better.